Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Julia Jenaé, filling in for Vinnie. The subject of our investigation is the case of a family with family ties, money, and murder. A tragedy that played out in Northeast Mississippi. Here's the story. Kirby Carpenter was a successful businessman, a proud United States Marine Corps veteran, and a father of two. He was gunned down outside of his Mississippi home in 2022.
Kirby was a very good person and a loving person. And for someone to take that from his kids is very sad.
I had to like him. I don't know of anybody who wouldn't like him.
Carpenter's body was found covered by a curtain outside near a shed. First responders noted drag marks between his body and a pool of blood in the carport. He was last seen alive 2 days prior. According to Carpenter's family, he always carried a bag with him with about $300,000 in cash or silver or gold coins, and that bag was never found. Prosecutors say the three people who plotted to carry out Kirby's murder were his girlfriend, Jeffrey Spence, and her parents, Jeffrey and Karen. Investigators found a bag of coins in a car tied to Jeffrey. He, Karen, and Caitlin were charged with murder, grand larceny, and conspiracy. But earlier this year, Caitlin, Kirby's girlfriend and mother of his child, struck a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to accessory after the fact. She agreed to testify against her parents in exchange for a suspended 20-year sentence. And days before going to trial, Karen, Caitlin's mother, pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact to grand larceny for a suspended 10-year sentence, setting up a murder trial for Jeffrey Spence. This is a case that went all the way to a jury with a trial, with the state saying that this defendant was the mastermind in the murder of Kirby Carpenter, but the defense saying he was nowhere near the crime scene.
Spences were arrested in Virginia. They found keys on Mr. Spence to several lockboxes, storage units, etc. And in those lockboxes, we contend were items that belonged to Kirby Carpenter. Jeff Spence pulled the trigger. Jeff Spence murdered Kirby Carpenter.
Did this have any significance to you, just when you observe it?
Somebody close had something to do with it.
As a
normal person, I believe if they come rob somebody, based on what I've seen over the last 30 years, you're going to kill somebody and rob them and take their stuff. You're going to leave the body laying where it is. You're not going to try to hide the body. You're going to try to get out of there as fast as you can.
What happened on January the 9th?
January the 9th, Maddie had called me. And this was, like I said, trying to clean the house up and go through different things for the estate and all that, and found what appeared to be a drop of blood on the steps.
What did you do?
Took a sample.
And you said the first result was somebody related to Caitlin Spence.
A male relative, yes.
Matched that spot on the stairs, correct?
Yes.
And did you get a search warrant for Jeff Spence's DNA?
MBI did.
MBI did?
They did.
And what was the conclusion of that report?
That the sample was Jeff Spence DNA.
What items were seized that day in association with Mr. Spence's arrest? These were found in his vehicle or on his person?
Yes, so a significant amount of cash, loose cash. There was cash wrapped in tinfoil, a small red flashlight, a pink wallet, cell phone, cigarette lighter. There was some keys to safe deposit boxes and a key to a storage unit.
There's nothing in that bag, that box, that box, that box, that box that screams, I belong to Kirby Carpenter. Am I right about that?
Again, I would state that no, his name is not on any of the items other than the roll that we saw. The coins are packaged, as you say, for commercial. There's nothing that indicates who they actually belong to.
They could have come from Jeff Spence.
Yes, sir.
Did you subsequently learn who killed Kirby Carpenter after this time?
Yes.
And when was that?
When I had the waterfall conversation with my father, I asked him if he had anything to do with Kirby's death. asked him if what some of the things that I was hearing was true. He turned aggressive and very short with me in his answers. He said that he did what he had to do, that the less I knew, the better.
How did you take this conversation with respect to Kirby's death?
That he was confessing to me that he had killed Kirby.
The animosity that you have exhibited since you got into this room this morning all stems from the building of that modular home and disagreements over that.
No, sir. My uncomfortableness with having to be in this courtroom is because that man over there is not even handcuffed.
You don't have any respect and love for your father either, do you?
Love? Yes. After understanding what he has done over the years and seeing what he's done, respect, no.
Daughters on the stand pointing the finger at their father for murder. That would seem on the face to be compelling evidence for the state, strong evidence even. That gets us to the first question in our investigation. And that is, did Jeffrey Spence kill Kirby Carpenter? Let's bring in our guests who are going to help us answer this question and look at the arguments on both sides. We have with us criminal defense attorney and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta, with us, and journalist and host of the podcast Crime Writers On. Rebecca Lavoie is with us. Thank you so much for being here. Bob, I want to start with you, but actually before I get your response, I mentioned a trial in this case. A jury got to deliberate on this evidence, and their reaction or their outcome was pretty neutral. Take a listen.
Do you think that further deliberations, do you think any chance of any further deliberations moving the needle anywhere? Any of y'all think, do you think further deliberations will be any of use or not? Don't be bashful. Speak out, shake your head, whatever you think anyway. I see some of you shaking your head no. I see a lot of you shaking your head no. If you feel it has any choice declared mistrial, I will, y'all consult your calendars about when you may want to, if and then you want to retry this case.
Mistrial declared, and this was only after a handful of hours. Bob Motta, let me start by asking you about the state's evidence. What did you think was the most compelling part of their case, and did you see a different outcome ahead for this jury?
Frankly, I thought his daughters testifying against him was probably the most powerful evidence. I mean, otherwise it's a almost entirely circumstantial case. I think that the defense was able to kind of chip away at the fact that, you know, look, the things that they found in the lockbox didn't necessarily have any kind of indication that they were actually Kirby Carpenter's property. You know, I mean, if you're putting the pieces together and considering that he was a precious metals dealer and dealt in coins, it would seem to stand to reason that they were his, but that's not what the standard is in a criminal trial. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. And frankly, that they've discounted, at least 6 of the jurors discounted, because I think it was a 6-6 count on the hung, have discounted what the daughters are saying about him. Is kind of a head scratcher, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it was split down the middle, and that says a lot if you're analyzing this case. Rebecca, what did you think of the outcome from the jury, but also what evidence there was that supported the state's case here?
Yeah, frankly, the biggest thing I'm surprised about the outcome was the amount of time that the judge allowed the jurors to deliberate before saying it was hopeless. It was something like 4 hours. There were jury instructions in the morning and then just an afternoon of deliberations. That seems like giving up pretty quickly on the judge's part. And normally a judge is a little bit harsher on a jury when they come back and say they're deadlocked after just a few hours. It's funny because the daughter's testimony, I watched it earlier today, and it's very compelling. That being said, it's not exactly a target shot, like right in the middle of a target, right? Because you have a daughter saying that, you know, her father confessed to her, and then when she describes what it is he said to her, it doesn't sound to me like beyond reasonable doubt confession. It sounds like this is something that he said that I interpret as X, Y, Z, of course, assuming what she said is true. And I think it's also really important to understand that while the other daughter, Carolyn, talked about her earlier experiences with her parents, she sort of classified them as grifters, et cetera, she wasn't involved in this matter. So she's sort of talking about issues that happened years ago. And at the end of the day, it's really hard for me to think about convicting somebody based on what I heard and not a really great story from the prosecution.
We talked about the prosecution, so let's talk about the defense, because clearly they had some compelling arguments, at least to 6 of those jurors on the panel. And let's listen back to what they hammered home in this trial.
They want you to believe, I told you, that they concocted this theory. Jeff, Mississippi and Virginia, came back to Mississippi, did the deed, went back to Virginia with no proof. There's no proof of any of that. None, 0. Is that beyond a reasonable doubt? I told you that you should pay particular attention to Kirby Spence and her effort to get out of trouble and whatever she said about her father, and analyze these facts carefully as to her. Kirby was a drug dealer, and she was right there with him. Kirby sold methamphetamine, she was right there with him. Kirby sold pills, she was right there.
Criminal defense attorney Bob Mata, not surprising that the defense is going to muddy up not only the victim here, but also this state witness who is the defendant's daughter. But do you think the jurors, if they didn't believe Caitlin's story, did they fully not believe that Jeffrey Spence was involved at all? They were all living there in the house at the same time.
It's hard to know. I think that, and it's my number one attack strategy always to attack the timeline, which is what they did. And I thought that was probably one of the more effective things that they were able to attack in terms of, it involved thousands of miles of driving, in terms of going back and forth in order to have committed the crime. So from that perspective, I think that was powerful. And I think that they were able to poke enough holes in the daughter's testimony, as Rebecca was saying. This wasn't a case where you're going to have that smoking gun piece of evidence. It's one of your kind of typical circumstantial cases where it's a totality of the circumstances and you kind of have to put all the pieces together. And, when you stand back, you hope that it creates the picture in terms of the state that they're trying to put forward to the jury. And here, I think that they just felt that there were some holes that were a little too big for them to reach that incredibly high burden of beyond a reasonable doubt.
Rebecca, do you think that changes anything as far as how the prosecution moves forward? They have some options here.
They do. One of their options, obviously, is to retry. And interestingly, the defense didn't put on a defense. They didn't call any witnesses. They didn't have a defense. And the prosecution usually learns from what the defense does in a first trial. If there's a second trial, what they're going to learn here is that their case is weak. And the jury, I think what they heard from that lack of defense was, we're so certain about the holes we poked that we don't even need to do anymore. It's an unusual strategy for a defense that seems fairly well-resourced, but it worked in this case. And I'm curious to see what the prosecution decides to do, because it's not like they can say, that defense witness was terrible, let's bring them back in, let's make sure we cross-examine them. Like, they can't do that because there was no defense. And I think that's a really interesting component here.
Oh, yeah. And we will see if they retry, if they change up their case completely. Rebecca and Bob, stand by. We have to get to our break. When we come back, though, we're going to analyze this. What was the alleged motive in this case?
Jeff Spence took this man away from Maddie Jane, his mother, his sisters, Casey and Wendy, and most importantly, his 2 children.
My
two best friends were just murdered.
Join me for a Court TV true crime series where we take you from the crime scene to the courtroom.
Donna Adelson hates every piece of grass that Dan Marcel ever walked on.
It's something that'll haunt all of us forever.
It always seemed like he was covering or deceiving.
This was a whole different level.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands. New episodes Saturday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific.
Only on Court TV.
That was a 911 call made by Caitlin Spence. She is letting authorities know that she has discovered the body of her boyfriend, with whom she shared a home, Kirby Carpenter, dead in his shed. Now, it would be not too long later that investigators not only learned that he was murdered 2 days prior to this call, but they then identified Caitlin as a suspect. They also arrested her mother and her father. Now, the two ladies here, they took a plea deal, and Jeffrey Spence stood trial alone. These were essentially family members. They were all living together in a home, trying to raise a shared baby between Caitlin and the victim, Kirby Carpenter, when things clearly went awry. Prosecutors, though, they don't have to give a motive to the jury. They offered one at trial.
Jeff Spence had the motive that's greed. Jeff Spence had the opportunity in 19 hours. Jeff Spence took this man away from Maddie Jane, his mother, his sisters, Casey and Wendy, and most importantly, his two children. Jeff doesn't care. Prison's not a deterrent to him. A deterrent to what? A deterrent to murder. He's guilty. Find him guilty. Thank you.
Prosecution highlighting their motive that they believe is at the center of this case as greed. So that gets us to the next question in our investigation. What was the alleged motive here? Let's bring in our guests who are going to help us answer this question. We have criminal defense attorney and former district attorney Matthew Mangino. And still here with us, journalist and host of the podcast Crime Writers On, Rebecca Lavoie is with us. Rebecca, tell me what you thought came out during trial in regards to a motive.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely sort of characterizing Jeffrey Spence as a grifter, right? His daughter testified along those lines. You know, they definitely have had some financial issues in their life. That being said, they also sort of described this very elaborate, very twisty family conspiracy that doesn't really, in my opinion, bear out. Now, listen, I'm not saying that he's innocent. I don't know. And that's the problem, is that I don't really have a better sense of that after watching this. Whoever killed Jeffrey Spence and allegedly stole his giant bag of money was probably greed, right? Why does it have to be this man being more greedy than another man? Earlier, we heard something about, the cops thought that a person who knew him, wouldn't have left the body right there. Well, a person who knew him and had this plan may have made a better plan to dispose of the body as well. So there's a lot of things here that were sort of felt like spaghetti thrown at the wall to me that didn't really make a clear pattern that led me in any particular direction.
And it seemed like half of the jurors, because this was a mistrial and a deadlock jury, agreed with you. Just didn't feel like the prosecution got there. Matthew Mangino, do you think the motive was too questionable for these jurors, even though the prosecution does not have to prove motive?
Well, right, Julia. They don't have to prove a motive in order to get a conviction in a criminal case and prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, obviously, this seems to be about money. Kirby Carpenter had a kind of unconventional business where he carried all of his documents with him and money and rare coins and things like that. He seemed to work in sort of a sort of fuzzy area in terms of what he did. Carried a lot of cash and things like that. So he would be the subject of a robbery, certainly by someone who knows that he runs his business in this manner. What's surprising here is that you have two people who are associated with Jeffrey Spence pleading guilty. His daughter pleads to accessory to murder. His wife pleads guilty. And then ultimately this case comes to a jury. And I'm sure the prosecution felt, with these witnesses who've rolled over on their own husband, their own father, we're going to have a strong case to prove that to a jury. But I think they fell short, obviously.
Obviously fell short. Rebecca, Matthew mentions those facts about the coins and all of the money that Kirby Carpenter kept on him. What was your reaction to hearing those details in this case?
It's odd, frankly, but of course I don't know much about the coin dealing business, if that was the business that he was actually in full time. It did come out in trial that he was also allegedly a drug dealer, which I think does put somebody in the frame for different kinds of motives and different kinds of crimes. And I think that may have been in the jury's mind. And, one of the things I kept thinking about was the plea issue. The fact that these two women took pleas does not mean that and I think the jury understood this because the defense did a good job with this, it doesn't mean they're confessing to the crime they did and they definitely did it. It means that they got a deal so they wouldn't have to go to jail. This happens all the time. This is how most cases are resolved. And I think that the defense did a good job sort of pointing to the flaw there, that just because his girlfriend says, I was an accessory after the fact. Like, what does that mean exactly? And would you or would you not also take that plea if it meant you didn't have to go to trial and potentially go to prison for a really long time?
Yeah, so surprising to have two daughters on the stand, but it seemed that their testimony did not sway the jury. Matthew and Rebecca, we appreciate your analysis. We are going to take our break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask more about this victim, Kirby Carpenter, a veteran and self-made businessman. Welcome back to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Julia Jenaé, filling in for Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation into the murder case against Jeffrey Spence. It's a story of family ties, money, and murder, all happening in Northeast Mississippi. Here's the story.
Investigators say a family plotted and carried out the murder of a Mississippi man in 2022. Kirby Carpenter was a successful businessman, a proud United States Marine Corps veteran, and a father of two. He was found shot and killed outside of his home, his body covered by a curtain near a shed with drag marks leading from his carport. A bag of money, which his family said he always carried on him, was never found. It would have had around $300,000 in cash, silver, or gold inside. Prosecutors say these three members of the Spence family are responsible. Jeffrey and Karen Spence, a couple in their 60s, and their daughter Caitlin, who was dating Kirby and had a baby with him. Investigators found a bag of silver coins in a car tied to Jeffrey. He, Karen, and Caitlin were charged with murder, conspiracy, and grand larceny. But earlier this year, Caitlin struck a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to accessory after the fact. She agreed to testify against her parents in exchange for a suspended 20-year sentence. And Karen, Caitlin's mother, also struck a deal. She pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact for a suspended 10-year sentence, setting up a murder trial for the family patriarch, Jeffrey Spence.
Carpenter's money and means became a focal point in this case for the state, who argued that this was the motive and the robbery for these murder charges that they brought against Jeffrey Spence. And the defense also using it to say others might have had the same motive. The state brought in his real estate attorney to testify. Here's a look at some of that testimony.
What the total value of Kirby's estate of the stuff that was found to be? including the land.
Of the stuff that was auctioned, I believe was about $1.5 million.
And there's still stuff that's unsold.
There is. There's still a house and 120 acres. There is another gun safe full of gold coins, a couple of guns, and some other, I guess, more personal items that Caitlin and Whitney wanted to set aside for the children.
All right. And being familiar with Kirby for 12 years, knowing his business, did the estate as inventoried by you and the auction company contain much cash?
No, there was very little cash. He had $2,800 in his pocket, and I don't remember much cash at all being in those safes.
All right. What about gold?
No, there was very little gold. There was a few small gold pieces, but it was odd to me how little gold and cash there was.
State Attorney Bart Adams there testifying on the stand. And that brings us to our next question in the investigation. What do we know about the victim, about Kirby Carpenter? And to help us answer that question, we have with us the person that you just saw, Kirby Carpenter's estate attorney, Bart Adams, is with us. And also coming back onto the program, criminal defense attorney and host of Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta, is with us. Bart, let me start with you. And actually, before I get your reaction to not only the jury deadlocking today, but your testimony on the stand, I want to play what the prosecution said out the gate in their opening statement, trying to make sure that they humanize Kirby Carpenter in front of this jury.
First question is, who is Kirby Carpenter? While we're here, he died on November 30th of 2022. He was the father of 2 children, Towns and Enola. He was a son to Maddie Jane and Jerry. He was a brother to 2 sisters, Casey and Wendy, and a brother to 3 other brothers. He was a Marine Corps veteran. He was a musician, an outdoorsman, an entrepreneur, a business owner. He owned a company called Mississippi Gold, Silver, and Coin Exchange in Ripley. I think the testimony is going to be that he was a self-made man, and by all accounts, he was financially successful. He was only 36 years old when he died.
36 years old. Bart Adams, can I get your reaction to today's mistrial from this jury?
I wish I could say I was surprised. This trial was going to be tough from the get-go. There's a whole lot of circumstantial evidence. There's no smoking gun, if you will. I've been practicing law for 23 years, been prosecuting for 18 years, so I've seen these type things before, and honestly, it's a toss-up a lot of times whether or not you can get that conviction based on mostly circumstantial evidence.
Bart, can you give our viewers an understanding of why you had to come in and take the stand in this case? Why was it important for these jurors to know so much about his estate, his means, his money?
Sure. The prosecution's case was built around greed. Their argument was that Jeff and the family committed this murder to try to get money. So they brought me in to try to show that there was a substantial estate there. The questions they asked me dealing with the auctions that were held, you know, there was about $1.5 million in the auctions. There's still other assets of the estate that need to be dealt with. So I think anybody would agree that a couple of $1 million is a lot of money.
Bob Motta, when you're thinking about this case, especially from a prosecutor's standpoint, to stick with just greed as the motive, do you think that that made jurors wonder if there were other people who could have had the same motive, or if there was anything else that may have been going, any friction inside of this home between these family members, the Spences, and Kirby Carpenter, who was allowing them to live in his home?
Yeah, I think from the state's perspective, it was a little bit of a risky move to go strictly on the greed theory because, the fact of the matter is if it's well known that he's walking around with cash, that he's, got gold with him and rare coins, I mean, that's going to make him a target, and I mean, it's easier for a defense attorney to say, look, this area, he's well known. Everybody knows he has cash. He is a target for somebody that is trying to get a quick windfall to come and just hit him while he's out, hit and run, grab the bag, they're done. So, I mean, from that perspective, it kind of tells me that as much as the prosecutors wanted to have a different motive, which, as you aptly stated, they do not have to prove, but jurors want it tells me that they couldn't find anything. That there wasn't that thing that they needed where they could have maybe said, all right, you know what, maybe the greed thing is a little too risky for us. Let's maybe try to make a move like, something relating to maybe the custody of the child or something that has more bones to it in terms of, all right, look, this is going to resonate with the jury. And these are the only people that would have a motive when it's related to something like, say, the custody of a child,
Yeah, Bart, to that point about custody of the child, help us understand. Caitlin Spence and Kirby Carpenter were not married. Did she stand to inherit anything from his death?
Caitlin did not. Enola, the child, obviously, is one of his two heirs.
And so, as guardian of the child, would she have had access to that if something happened to Kirby, which unfortunately it did?
She would have limited access. She would be required to report to the courts what she was doing with any of the money that was left to Enola.
And a quick question just about Kirby. Do you feel, as someone who knew him for 12 to 15 years in this professional capacity, do you feel that the prosecution was able to adequately share with these jurors who he was? Is it an accurate picture from your view?
Yeah, I think they did a pretty good job painting Kirby, painting his life. I mean, Kirby was an entrepreneur. Kirby was in pretty much any business he could make money in. I thought the defense did a good job bringing out the whole, was he a drug dealer? Was he not a drug dealer? I think that plays right into the prosecution's case.
And Bob Motta, I want to get your final thoughts on this deadlocked jury. Where do we go from here? If you're the prosecution, what do you do with a case where clearly half of your jury did not believe the case beyond a reasonable doubt?
Well, I think you have to think long and hard. I know their instinct is to always say, yeah, we're going to try him again right after the thing is deadlocked. But I think they're going to have to really sit back and kind of evaluate whether or not ultimately they have enough evidence to move forward. Because as Bart said, this is a strictly circumstantial case. And where it's laying right now, short of them digging something up in the interim between now and when they set the new trial, I mean, you're basically walking in with the same exact case. And this wasn't a 10-2 split, towards guilt. This was 6-6, which I think is playing into the judge's mindset in terms of why he didn't force longer deliberations and give the jury a charge to go back and continue to deliberate. He's hearing, look, they're split down the middle. They're a million miles away on this thing. And he heard all the evidence, the judge did. So, I mean, I think that they're going to really have to, I understand that they want to get justice for Kirby, and he deserves that. But I think they're going to really have to bolster the case in order to get a conviction on it.
Bob Motta and Bart Adams, thank you so much for sharing your time with us, helping us to understand this case more fully. Still to come, we're going to talk about this Spence family dynamic.
I asked him if he had anything to do with Kirby's death. I asked him if what some of the things that I was hearing was true.
Covering the country's biggest trials before we bring you inside the courtroom. Plus, the true crime cases you want to know more about in our daily spotlight.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8, 7 Central on Court TV. Interview with a Killer. Killer. New season premieres Saturday, October 25th, only on Court TV.
Do you recall your father's demeanor at that when he was telling you these things?
Angry.
Had you ever seen that before?
No.
Had you ever seen that side of it?
No.
That was Caitlin Spence, someone who's also a defendant in the case against her father, Jeffrey Spence, for the murder of Kirby Carpenter. She accepted a deal, saying that she did plead to accessory after the fact. She says she overheard a confession, got a confession from her father. There was an independent witness who said that he overheard Caitlin Spence talking about what happened between her father and her boyfriend, Kirby Carpenter. Here's a listen to more of that testimony that was so important in this case in front of the jury.
I asked him if he had anything to do with Kirby's death. I asked him if some of the things that I was hearing was true. He turned aggressive and very short with me in his answers. He said that it wasn't my job to find, who Kirby's killer was, that Enola was my only responsibility. He said that he did what he had to do, that the less I knew, the better. He said that I shouldn't let a gift horse in the mouth.
Are you responding to this?
Trying to. Most of the time I didn't get much out.
You didn't come up with what we've heard here today until April of this year. Am I correct?
That's when I had my testimony, yes.
And you didn't give this proffered information until you had a deal in place that gave you freedom, bail, access back to your daughter. Am I correct?
This has nothing to do with my daughter. They don't have control of my daughter. I am testifying truthfully, and then I will be sentenced. That is what happened in April. I believed that when we were arrested, that my father would come forward and tell the truth. And I did not want to have to be testifying against him. I am testifying today with the truth because I feel that the truth needs to be heard.
Caitlin did plead guilty, and she received a 20-year suspended sentence. That's the term of the plea agreement. It sounds like she is still yet to be officially sentenced, but she was out on bond. So that's why she's inside of the courtroom, not in jail clothes, but in plain clothes. And that gets us to the next question in our investigation. And that is, what is the Spence family dynamic here? We have two daughters who testified against Jeffrey Spence and his own wife pleading guilty to accessory after the fact. Here to help us with our investigation is Kirby Carpenter's estate attorney, Bart Adams, and still with us, criminal defense attorney and former district attorney, Matthew Mangino. Matthew, I want to start with you because this sentencing or plea agreement when it comes to Caitlin Spence is a bit confusing. So talk to us about what a 20-year suspended sentence means in terms of a plea agreement, and why do you think she was released on bond before this trial went forward?
Well, Julia, as you know, when you enter into a plea agreement, a plea bargain, it is exactly what it means. It's an agreement. So both parties have a give and take. The prosecutors put something on the table. The defense comes back. This was an important witness for the prosecution's case. So they negotiated a plea that ultimately let her be released on bond, so she would be out of jail pending trial. And then if she testifies truthfully at trial, then the recommended sentence would be a suspended sentence of 20 years, which means that she's not going to go to jail. She has a 20-year sentence. It's suspended if she doesn't violate her parole, she's out on the street. She continues to be out on the street until she serves her 20 years of supervision. So it's a give and take. It's a negotiation, and she got herself a good deal. She testified, and ultimately the prosecution couldn't prove to all 12 jurors, could only prove to 6 that Jeffrey Spence was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Matthew, real quick, in terms of this witness on the stand, she's also a defendant, not wearing jail clothes. We usually see co-conspirators in jail clothes. Do you think that helped the defense if jurors perhaps thought, if you're a co-conspirator, you should be behind bars?
Well, that may have been a factor for this jury, but I think the other thing that's important is her testimony. Listen to what she said. She never said that her father confessed to this killing. She said that he got angry, that he got short with her. He told her to mind her own business, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. But she never said that my father said, yes, I killed Kirby Carpenter. And I think jurors wanted to hear that if that's what she's going to opine or want this jury to believe, that what her father said to her was tantamount to a confession.
Bart, we know that they were all living, in terms of Jeffrey Spence, his wife Karen Spence, and his daughter Caitlin, the child that she shared with Kirby. They were all living at Kirby's home. You testified about all of the items that were inside of the home that had to be taken to an armory. It was so much. What can you tell us about this house and perhaps the decision that the Spences made to move in with him versus moving to the Spence home?
Well, I guess there was just room there. Kate had been living there for some time. I believe the only reason the Spences came down was because of their granddaughter being born. I think that's what got them into Tippah County. I don't know how much of a relationship they had prior to moving in. After being in that house, it was not difficult to tell the amount of stuff that Kirby had accumulated. In the room that I referred to as the safe room in the trial, there's coins laying in the floor. There are boxes of coins. There was just so much stuff at that home.
So much stuff indeed, and the prosecution saying that Jeffrey Spence had a bag of the coins from that house in a car associated with him. Matthew Mangino, last comment on this, and that's about Caitlin. If the jury didn't believe what she said and perhaps thought that she was more involved, would there ever be a situation where the prosecution can bring more serious charges against her?
Well, if she testified truthfully, and this is what the proffer was, and it was reviewed by the prosecutor, she was prepared, I'm sure, for her testimony. If she deviated from what they expected, that could cost her plea. But if she testified to what they thought she was going to testify to and what they prepared for in terms of her testimony, then I think they have to honor their plea offer.
Matthew Mangino and Bart Adams, thank you so much for weighing in on this topic. It's a case that continues with no outcome because just a few hours into the jury's deliberation, they announced they were deadlocked. And the split was severe, 6-6, a number that's pretty telling and could have an impact on what comes next in this case. The prosecution can retry it as many times as they want until there's a verdict. But will they? With these details, will they consider a plea, adjust their case, or simply move forward with the same case again? We'll continue to watch it. I'm Julia Jenaé filling in for Vinnie Politan. This is Vinnie Politan Investigates. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.